with a lot of Parsha's Kdoshim is a big Parsha with a lot of commandments. And like I mentioned last week, that before we're going to discuss something in the Parsha, I would like to share something in history which takes place this week. And perhaps if we can learn some lesson from it. So there is an historical fact which is recorded by no other than the Rambam. Maimonides himself writes it in a letter. That letter is printed. The book which is printed is a book called Haredim, which was written by one of the great rabbis in Tzfat during the Ari's time, actually a student of the Ari. And the Rambam describes how he came to Israel. As you know, the Rambam had to run. Then it was the Muslims that he was running for his life. And he writes, and I'm reading you what he writes in his letter. He says as follows, that it was Sunday night, the 4th of Iyar, which is like today, the 4th of Iyar. I was boarding the ship, went into the ocean, and then 6 days later, on the 10th of Iyar, and he writes, the year is Taf Kuf Chaf A, which means 625. 625, what is that today? Afmir 5782, let's see how many years ago it was. 5782 minus, what was that? 605, yeah, I'm sorry. What year was it? It was the year 525, okay? So minus 4525, no, I'm sorry, 4525, 5,782. Anyway, doesn't make any sense, doesn't matter. When the Rambam's life, I don't know, like in the year, he went to Israel and he saw that when he went into the ocean, they were basically about to drown. There was a big storm and they were about to drown in the ocean, and miraculously they survived. So the Rambam writes that when a person is in a time of distress, which he actually writes it also in his code of law, even if it's a personal distress, you should take upon yourself a fast day in reflecting of your own personal good deeds and do tshuva. And the Rambam says, I made a promise that every single year, when it's going to come the same day, the 4th of Iyar, which is on the calendar tonight, he says that I am going to fast every year to remember how I survived, and God helped me to survive the very difficult storm in the ocean, which I barely survived. Matter of fact, the Rambam, dealing with oceans, had a brother, which he was his big supporter. So he should be able to learn and write his books. Unfortunately, that brother, which his name was David, also drowned in the ocean on a different occasion. And at that point, the Rambam became completely penniless, and he had to work in order to support himself and at the same time be involved in many of the other affairs that he was involved in, which obviously gave his big contribution as the greatest teacher in our life, called the Rambam. So this happened on today, the 4th of Iyar, the Rambam records it. So I was thinking what we can learn from it. I saw a beautiful letter that the Rabbi writes to somebody the last week of Nisan in the year 1951. And that apparently this individual was dealing with challenges in his life. And the Rebbe paraphrases the statement in Pirkei Avot that there is the famous statement, you live against your will, which means that life is not always a party, there's not always indulgence, and sometimes you're lacking the rest, and sometimes there is a little bit of pain. And you have to know that, as the Torah says, that's all for the good, and you live against your will. But the Rebbe writes in his letter, and he says, we see very clearly that the impression which the life cycle events have on a person really depends how you react to it. How do you decide in your own mind, how do I want to take it? In other words, it's not only the actual pain. You can overcome a lot of difficult situations if your reaction to those difficulties is calmly. And who does he use as an example? So he says in his letter, and I'm reading it right here from the Book of Letters of 1951, he says, I'm translating from Hebrew, who do we have greater than the Rambam, Maimonides, that the external history of his life was filled with stress, suffering, and tragedies, very unusual tragedies, is the life of the Rambam. And yet, his outlook on life, as he explains it in his books, especially in the book Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide to the Perplexed, was especially good. And the Rebbe writes in Hebrew words, optimistic. He uses the words optimistic, meaning he was looking at life in a very optimistic way, even though that he did go through a very difficult life. In the other hand, we find people which seemingly in their regular life, they look very successful, but very, very non-often, few times in their life do you see them going through any type of satisfaction. So basically, what's the lesson for the Rambam, which he describes today's day as a day that he had fasted every year, being that he was in such a challenging time, he was about to drown in the ocean, is the idea what the Rebbe says, that despite the challenges that the Rambam had, he was a very optimistic person in his personal lifestyle, and that what got the Rambam to come and to be the great person it was, that we can all learn from him and enjoy his writings and benefit from him, no greater than other. So this is our so-called moment of Jewish history. And now we are going to turn to the Parsha. Parsha's Kdoshim, as you all know, discusses a lot of different mitzvot, a lot of commandments. And I'm going to discuss yet again the mitzvah, which we probably spoke about 100 times, if not more, but it's something which we cannot stop talking about it, and we should not stop speaking about it. And this is the mitzvah of this week's Parsha, Ve'ohavta l'reacha kamocha, to love your fellow as yourself. As the great Rabbi Akiva, the great teacher Rabbi Akiva, presented this mitzvah by referring to it as a general rule in the Torah. I'm going to start with the story. The story is recorded in the Talmud, Tractate Shabbat, in the end of Tractate Shabbat. And this is what the Gemara says, the following story. This is on page 127, Shabbat. There was a very poor man who went to work for a very rich man in the northern Galilee of Israel. The poor worker was granted bed and breakfast. He was granted a bed to sleep and food to eat, but the money for the job was conditioned that he's only going to collect at the end of his service. He worked 3 constant years for his employer in the Galilee. And when it finished the 3 years, it was exactly just before Yom Kippur. And the poor man, who is now after 3 years not seeing his family, he's decided it's time to go home and to celebrate the holidays, Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and obviously Simchas Torah, to be together with his mishpacha, with his family. The Gemara continues, he approached the rich man and he asks him for his wages. But to his surprise, the rich man responds by saying, I am sorry. You came at a very bad time, and I have nothing to give you now. The employee was shocked. 3 years, far from home, 36 months away from his wife, away from his family. The children are growing up 36 months without a father. They go by themselves to shul. They sit alone by the Shabbos table. Everything with the hope in the anticipation that dad is going to come home soon with a wallet full of money. And therefore, we are ready to go through this temporary, perhaps even long, temporary time period, and hoping that we are going to be a comfortable family to live a happy life. And yet, he is going to come home after 3 years, penniless, the same person that he had left 3 years earlier. He was devastated. You can imagine his devastation. You can imagine his pain. He turns to the rich man, the Gemara says, and he tells him, what do you mean you have nothing to give? You live on a property which is worth millions. If you can't pay me with cash, maybe give me a little piece of land. You don't want to give me some of the land. Give me some of your belongings. Maybe I can take some pillows, some blankets. I will take anything you're ready to give me, but let me come home with something. I can really not come home empty-handed. It's going to be very difficult for my wife and very painful to my kids. How can I face them after 3 years waiting for me and then coming back with nothing? The rich man, apparently very stubborn, turns to him and he says, I am sorry. I have nothing to give you. I have nothing to give you. What do? You go home. What should you do? I guess they did not have a written contract. They couldn't call the police. They couldn't sue him. There is no money. There's nothing you can give me, even though apparently he does have some belongings in his house. So the Talmud, it's a Talmudic story. So the guy decides it's time to go home. And he comes home with garnished. Obviously, the holiday was not the holiday it was meant to be. It was very difficult. Says the Gemara, just very close to the holiday, right after the holiday, suddenly, lo and behold, the rich employer is arriving at the house of his former worker, 3 wagons loaded with merchandise, a payment for the entire salary that he owed them for 3 years. He turns to his employee, the former employee, and the employer asks him, tell me honestly, what went through your mind when you heard that I told you that I have nothing to pay? What were you thinking? What were you thinking when I told you I can't give you anything at the time that I lived on $1 million property, and you saw that I have shelves full with other merchandise, with other items? What went through your mind? I want to now for you to respond to me. If you can honestly tell me, what were you thinking about me when you heard those words? Says the Gemara, the employee turns to him and he says, I will be honest with you. What went through my mind was, perhaps you must have been given and dedicated everything to charity. It's not yours anymore. You designated your property to the temple, and you designated your belongings to the temple. Everything was given a gift to tzedakah, and it's not yours. And that's why you're honestly telling me that you don't have. This is what went through in my mind. The former employer, the rich man, gives him a big hug. And he says, you know what? I swear to you, this is exactly what happened. And I will tell you even why it happened. I have a son, as you know, and I was very angry on my son. Something he did that he really got me upset. And I decided that I don't want to leave anything for that child. I don't want him to have anything to inherit me. And I made a vow that everything I have belongs to the temple. And that's exactly what happened. That's why after 3 years, you came and you told me I need to get paid. I told you I don't have, because at that point, whatever was there was not mine anymore. I gave it away to the temple in a term of a vow, of a neder. And then things worked out, and I'm able to repay you. And he turns to them and he says, just like you considered my benefit, meaning you gave me the benefit of the doubt. You didn't look at me and say, what a Russia, what an evil man. After 3 years, what does he think it is? He cheated me and walked around all upset. You actually had a positive attitude towards me. Therefore, I give you my same wishes, that Hashem should always judge you positively. This is what the Gemara says, and you can look up the story in Tractate Shabbat, page 127. We have a form of Talmudic text which is printed and written by some of the Geonim. The Geonim was the generation right post-Talmudic era, who were the rabbis of Babylon. They were also tremendous people, men of divine inspiration, and they are the ones who are responsible for transmitting the oral tradition until it was finally written down. This is the area before the Rambam. So one of the books we have, it's called She'iltot de Rav Achai Gaon. Achai Gaon. Gaon was the title that they all shared, all those giants in Babylonian period. And there was Reb Saadia Gaon, there was Rab Achai Gaon, there was all kinds of Geonim, and we have a printed book. And I actually have the book. It's called She'iltot de Rav Achai Gaon, which also many times quotes parts of the Talmud, but it quotes it sometimes with a little more information the way it is written in the Talmud. So in that she'iltot, it quotes the very story that I just read for you. The only thing is, the she'iltot identifies who was this employee. What was his name? And you know what it tells us? That this employee was our own great Rabbi Akiva before he became Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was that worker who for 3 years was working for this man, and he had given him the benefit of the doubt after 3 years not getting paid. And this is the story, is a story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, we're going to come back to the story soon, but Rabbi Akiva is obviously the one which takes the verse of this week's Parsha called Ve'ahavta le'recha kamocha, and Rabbi Akiva says that this verse, the single verse among all the verses in the Torah, is the verse which is considered the great rule, the general principle, which the whole Torah centers around. If you want to go to the so-called core essence of what Torah is all about, consider that verse, Ve'ahavta le'reacha kamocha. Love your fellow as yourself. Which is also related to another Talmudic story, which we're all familiar with, the guy who wanted to convert to Judaism standing on one foot, and Hillel took him seriously, and he said, I'm going to teach you the entire Torah while you stand on one foot. It wouldn't take long. Because the entire Torah is, Hillel told them, that what you don't like people to do to you, don't do to others. Everything else is commentary, which obviously needs explanation. What does it mean that this is the entire Torah? There's obviously much more to Torah than the mitzvah to love your fellow Jew. So really, many times we talk about this mitzvah, trying to understand what the mitzvah is, and let's try to analyze it for a little bit. Especially, historically again, we are in a very interesting time period, exactly now when we are sitting here today and learning, which is the month of Iyar, is a very, very interesting period. In one end, this is a time period which is very inspirational, uplifting, because we are marching from Egypt to Sinai. That's what we are doing. We are walking from our matzah to our bagels and lox. This is what we are going to, the cheesecake of the Shavuos Kiddush. That's what we are all heading towards. And we are going to receive the Torah. And this is the time when the Jews historically were preparing in receiving the Torah, which makes the time period very special to the very interesting expression given by Ramban, Nachmanides. Nachmanides refers to this time period as a Chol HaMoed period between Pesach and Shavuot. He says that when it comes to Sukkot, there is a 7-day holiday. There is the first day and the 7th, and following the 7th, there is an 8th day called Shmini Atzeret, which is a holiday on its own. It has its own bracha, Shechianu. It has its own service in the temple time. This is what happens on Sukkot. So Ramban says, what happens on Pesach? How comes Pesach doesn't have following it a holiday called Shmini Atzeret? You know what he answers? We do have a Shmini Atzeret. It's just not the day right after the 7 days. It is 47 days later. 48 days later. And this is Shavuot. And the Ramban, Nachmanides, in this Parsha of Emor, he writes, and this is his words, V'hayamim, he says, 7 days of Pesach, and then you count 49 days, and following the 49 days, the day was sanctified like Shmini Atzeret, והימים הספורים בינתיים כחולו של מועד בין הראשון והשמיני בחג, והוא יום מתן תורה, שהרם בו אישו הגדולה, ולכן קראו רבותינו חג השבועות עצרת, כי הוא כיום שמיני של חג. Nachmanides says, what's the name of the holiday of Shavuot? Atzeret. Why is it called Atzeret? The word Atzeret just means stop. Stop. S-T-O-P. That's what the name of the Yom Tov is. What kind of name is that? So he said because that name is very similar to the other Atzeret that is after Sukkot. That, as the Medrash explains, God told the Jewish people after 7 days of Sukkot, stop, don't go home yet. I want to spend some more time with you. What is the Atzeret after Pesach? The Atzeret after Pesach is the holiday of Shavuot. What happens between Shmini Atzeret and the first day of Sukkot? It's days which contain some level of holiness. That's why it's called Chol HaMoed. It is a weekday, but it's at the same time, simultaneously, it's also Moed, which means holiday. And the same is between Pesach and Shavuot. All these 49 days that we are counting the Omer is really days which are carrying a certain status of Chol HaMoed. So on one end, it is uplifting days, spiritual days. But on the same time, we know that we are not supposed to celebrate in these days of the counting of the Omer. At least 33 days of that period is considered days of mourning. What are we mourning about? There's no Jewish weddings taking place this week. Why? Because this is a time period in Jewish history where Rabbi Akiva lost 22,000 of his students. And those 22,000 students were dying because, 24,000 of his students, and these 24,000 students died specifically, as being explained in the Talmud, because they were not respectful to each other. And it was in one short time period, which makes it even more challenging that this Rabbi Akiva, who was the master of sensitivity and love, and the one who took that very same verse of Ve'ohavto l'reyacho kamocha, and he considered that verse, he put it on a stool, and he said, this is the verse that everything in Torah centers around, yet this Rabbi Akiva had never such an unfortunate situation that because of that, this very time period, which should have been a very uplifting, joyful time period, is actually a time period called Avilut, a time period for mourning. Due to this disrespect, what does it mean, Ve'ohavto l'reyacha kamocha? There is a very ancient book called Ikrim, written by Rabbi Yosef Elbo, one of the early philosophers, and he writes that the word ahava, which means love in Hebrew, has also, like many other words in Hebrew, a numerical value, which gives us an understanding what ahava is all about. And he writes, what is the numerical value of the word ahava? The way you spell ahava in Hebrew is aleph, which equals the number 1. And hey, which equals to number 5, which makes it now into 6. And Beis, which is number 2, which makes it into 8. And Hey again, which is number 5, which equals 13. So the word ahava, love in Hebrew, has the numerical value of 13. What famous word in Hebrew that even those who don't speak Hebrew know, and it has the value of 13? It's a word that you say at least twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. The last word of the Shema is the word echad. Echad means one. And the way you spell echad is aleph, which equals 1, plus chet, which equals 8, makes it 9, plus daled equals 4, which makes it into 13. So the word ahava and the word echad share the same numerical value, which the idea behind it, says Ramban, says the Ikrim, is that what is ultimately ahava? What does it mean, love? Love means unity. Love is the unnatural ability to take two things and make them into one. And to make them into one, you have two things which are seemingly separate. Each one shares its own entity. Each one has its own identity. God gives us an unlimited power, which is above and beyond nature, to be able to join another person in a way of oneness, that me and the next person are becoming one. Is it really possible to become one? Is a very big question, because ultimately that's exactly what the verse says in this Parsha. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Kamocha means what? Like yourself. Is it possible to look at somebody else and to be able to love him as you love yourself? It's a big question which many of the commentaries are trying to understand. Matter of fact, every word in that verse is questionable. Ve'ahavta, you shall love. The commentaries ask, what kind of commandment is that you shall love? If I love, then I love. If I don't love, I don't. My wife made a soup and she says, oh, I want you to love that soup. Don't tell me I want you to love it. You can tell me I want you to eat it. And I'm going to eat it if I love it or not. But to command me to love it, if I would love it, I would love it. I mean, you want me to tell you that I love it if I don't? You don't want me to lie to you. But what does it mean, the words, ve'ahavta, you shall love? How can you command someone on love? L'reacha means your fellow, but can mean any type of fellow. Is it possible to love every fellow? What if somebody is a very, very not nice person? By the way, you know what the Talmud says? Something very interesting, that when the Jewish court is ruling that someone deserves the death penalty, so the Talmud says that you should execute it in a very respectful manner because of this mitzvah, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. In other words, in English, we have an expression, I love you to death. So what does it mean, I love you to death? I love you, I want to see you dead? Maybe. I love you without any limitations. But here there's a very interesting insight. I love you to death, that even when somebody has to die in the Jewish law, the way of doing it, the Talmud in Sanhedrin goes on with all kinds of great conditions and details to be the utmost respectful, even we're talking about a person who is really deserving it, because of this mitzvah, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Now, what does it mean? The big question is obviously, how can you command on love? How can you command to love everyone? And the big question is, how can you command that should be kamocha, like yourself? Like myself, he should be me. I once heard a good joke that there was two friends, very, very good friends, who they used to come, probably you heard it from me in the past. Two friends that used to come every morning to the bar and have a good drink. Every morning they got together and they had 2 cups of vodka. They ordered and they said l'chaim and went on to continue with the day. One morning, only one of them arrives. The bartender says, "Where is your friend?" So he said, "Unfortunately, my friend died, but I still want to continue ordering 2 cups of vodka. Just like before, I'm going to drink one for myself, and I'm going to drink one on behalf of my friend." Okay? Goes by a couple of years. This guy keeps on coming to the bar, ordering always 2, one for him, one on behalf of his friend, which is already not in this world. One day he comes and he tells the bartender that from today, I'm ordering only 1 cup. So the bartender says, "Why? What's going on? What happened to your friend?" So he says, "Listen, the doctor told me that I'm not allowed to drink anymore. My liver is completely gone. I'm not allowed to drink. So I decided that I'm going to stop drinking. But the cup that I drink for my friend, that I don't have to stop. This is not my cup." This is a cup. This is a cup of vodka for him. And this has to continue. In other words, kamocha. The second guy becomes like me. I mean, what kind of words is that, kamocha? If I cannot drink, then obviously I cannot drink on behalf of somebody else too. You can't make any jokes here. And Nachmanides actually, if you look in this Parsha, asked this very same question. And he says that when the Torah says kamocha, he uses the word haflaga. Haflaga in English means, he said the Torah exaggerates. The Torah exaggerates. This is not real. The Torah doesn't mean literally kamocha, because it's impossible, he says, to actually emotionally, mentally, even physically, to love someone like you. Even physically, he says, according to Jewish law, we have a concept that your life comes first. You know the famous Talmudic statement, also by Rabbi Akiva. You go in the desert and you have 1 pitcher of water, which can only sustain 1 life until you're going to get to a source of water. And there are 2 people. You don't share that pitcher. You drink it because your life comes first. This is an expectation in Jewish law. So how does that fit with kamocha? What does kamocha mean? What does kamocha mean? The Rambam, whom we mentioned before, he puts the emphasis on the practice of love. The Rambam kind of deviates from the philosophical, emotional aspect of Ava, and he says there are actually a number of so-called activities in life which they fulfill and express this commandment of ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. What does the Rambam says? He says you go visit the sick. That's the mitzvah of loving your fellow. You heard somebody is sick, they're in the hospital or they're home. They need a visitor. Go visit them. Go find out how they're doing. That's ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. God forbid somebody's in a state of mourning. You go down to comfort them. You help them with burial. That's the mitzvah, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, the Rambam says. He continues, he says, you have a wedding. You assist the groom and bride to get married or to participate in the wedding by bringing joy to your participation. That is all extensions of this great mitzvah called ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. This is my maladies. There are those who want to take it even a step further. It's actually the Ramban. Ramban He goes with the approach that in Yiddish there is an expression called farginen. In Hebrew, it's called lefargen. How does it go in English? Lefargen, to be happy on to be happy for somebody's gains, as if I'm the very same way I'm happy for myself. Must be a word for it. I don't know the word now. So Ramban actually uses this story, which we just read last week in synagogue, by the Haftorah. Those who were in shul last week, we did not have a regular Shabbat Haftorah. We were reading a special story which has to do, and we always read when Shabbat is in the eve of Rosh Chodesh, of the new month. And being that Sunday was the new month of Iyar, so that is what was read on Shabbat. The famous story of David and Jonathan. King Saul is pursuing David. He really wants to kill him. He knows that it's going to be David who is going to inherit the position of king, and it's not going to be his son Jonathan. And he's really trying to get rid of David. And David feels that the king, what the king feels about him. So he was a very close friend with Jonathan, but he was King Saul's son. And they decided to make a whole program, a whole idea to know whether or not King Saul wants to really kill him. And this had to do by him not coming to the meal. He wouldn't participate, he wouldn't be there. And by him not being there, the father's going to ask, and then you're going to see the father's reaction about King David once it's going to be mentioned and being discussed. And King Saul actually is exactly like King David saw it. He's asking, where is David? And Jonathan says he had to go to a friend, and he lashes out in the worst way possible about David. He's the one who's going to take away your kingdom. He's the one who is going to, to cause you all this trouble. And instead of Jonathan kind of realizing that, he's in trouble, and because of David, he goes and he shares with them the message, and he lets him know that he's in trouble, and he lets him know that things are not looking good, and you should better run for your life. And at the same time, who is he protecting? He's protecting somebody who is taking away seemingly the job which was meant for him. I'm sorry, I just closed my phone. He's taking away the job from somebody for a job which was actually meant for him. Right? That's what he's doing. Says the Ramban, which is, by the way it's quoted in Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot says that what is considered real friendship is like the friendship of David and Jonathan. Says Nachmanides, the idea is, don't look at the other person as a competitive to you. Let go. He gets what he needs. Hashem has for you what you need. No one is taking away what belongs to you. Whatever you deserve, you're getting. And if somebody else has, if it doesn't belong to you, it's never going to come to you. You can try whatever you want. So why fight? Why compete? There's a famous story. Sometime I spoke about the great Sephardic commentator of the Torah by the name of Ibn Ezra. You heard about Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra, who lived many years ago in Spain, and he was a tremendous scholar, and he wrote poetry. But when it came to finances, to his personal livelihood, Ibn Ezra was really not having any luck. He was very poor. Everywhere he put his hand went kaput. Always. To the point of the famous joke that he said that if I would invest in candles, those days there was no electricity. People at night used candles. So Ibn Ezra says, if I would invest in candles, the sun will never set. Because this is the kind of luck I am. Wherever I put my hand to, it doesn't work out. So one time, there was a community member who decided he's going to figure out a way. Also, he did not want to get support from the community. He tried to make it on his own, and it was very difficult. So one time, a community member decided that he has a way to figure out how Ibn Ezra will be able to get some money. Between Ibn Ezra's house and the synagogue, there was a bridge. So this guy said, I know he goes very ill in the morning to synagogue. So I'm going to come before and scatter around a bunch of dollar bills. In Jewish law, when you go on the street and you find scattered around dollar bills, you can put it in your pocket. It's only if it's in a wallet or in a bundle, then you have to announce it because there is an identifying sign that someone can come and identify that he was the one who lost it. But if you see scattered around dollars, everybody can come and say, it's my dollars. So you don't announce it, and then you can take it. So this community member decided, what a nice way, what a great idea. I'm going to be able to help Ibn Ezra. He doesn't like to take charity. Unfortunately, when it comes to business, he always ends up, going bankrupt. But here, I'm going to scatter some dollars around, and he's going to find them on his way to synagogue. So he's going to pick them up, and rightfully so, he can enjoy them. So he's going to have some money. And so he did. And lo and behold, Ibn Ezra comes to the bridge, and he presses the bridge, and he doesn't pick up anything. He doesn't pick up anything. Doesn't pick up anything. So when he crosses the bridge, the guy comes over to him and he says, there were some dollars on the bridge. Why didn't you pick them up? He says, Oi, this is again Ibn Ezra. He says, exactly today I decided on my way to synagogue, let me try to see if I can cross the bridge with my eyes closed. And that's how I walked over the bridge with my eyes closed. So I didn't see any dollars. And obviously, he realized again, it's not going to help you. If you are not meant to have it, there's always going to be something going wrong, and you're not going to end up having it. Here, he almost had an opportunity, and boom, that morning he decided, I'm walking the bridge with closed eyes. And again, he lost the opportunity. Hashem gives you what you need and what you have. And this is actually what Ramban says is what after Lerecha Kamocha means. Don't try to compete. You got what you need. And if you need to get more, there's going to be other avenues. Don't try to look to get that what to be and to get what somebody else has. But the truth is, this is all wonderful insight and explanation, but the ultimate explanation is really, what is ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? How can you activate some love to somebody else? Is really based ultimately to what Hasidus teaches us. Starting with the Alter Rebbe in chapter 32 in Tanya, which Hasidim also say that the number of the chapter is 32, which in Hebrew it's Lamed Bet, which means Lev. It is the heart of the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe says that you can love someone else. We can even command you to love someone else at the moment you're going to realize that somebody else is really a part of you and you are a part of him. How? There is one thing that nobody spoke about, not the Rambam, not the Ramban, not the Ibn Ezra. They waited for the Alter Rebbe to come and talk about it. And this is the neshama, the soul. The Alter Rebbe presses the buttons on that entity called neshama. And he says, what does neshama mean? Neshama means that you have a soul with the same soul is shared by another person and a second person and a third person. This is the only thing which can unite. Take the greatest relationships. It's still, they're always going to remain separate. You can even take a father and son and let them hug each other, but they're still, he is father and he is son. What are the two things that you join them together and they become really integrated into each other with no separation at all? This is when you take the flame of a fire and you put that next to another flame of fire and you join them together and they become one flame, inseparable. This is called unity. Says the Alter Rebbe that this is exactly what is being recorded in the Torah when it says, "Ve'ahavta le'recha kamocha." You should love. How? Meditate about the idea that you are a flame together with another flame. We just ended up in two separate bodies. So stop thinking about the separating body. Think about the uniting soul. And it's kamocha. How's it kamocha? Kamocha is because it is yourself. It is yourself. You are one with that. For that, you have to study Chassidus. You can study here and you can study there, but ultimately every single Jew from the times of the Baal Shem Tov, the Alter Rebbe knows that in order to really develop a love to another person, this is the philosophy of Hasidism, what gives us the strength and the inspiration to realize the importance of the neshama and to centralize the soul in our life so we can really be one and feel one with another. So I want to go back to the first story we learned tonight. The story that we identified later as Rabbi Akiva, the worker, which when he heard that his employer doesn't pay him after 3 years, the only thing which went through in his mind was not that he doesn't want to pay me, but it must be that he probably gave it all to the tzedakah. And we did not know the name. And I heard an amazing insight. If we know now who it is, why didn't the Talmud tell us who it was? Why was the Talmud hiding the name? And we had to wait till Rav Achai Gaon should come and identify the name to us. The Gemara did not want to tell us the name because if the Gemara would have said that it happened to Rabbi Akiva, you would say, oh, that's a story for Rabbi Akiva kind of people. This is not a story for me. The Gemara took out the name, so all the years we don't know who the story happened, so every single person can think that I can be that story. me too. But now that we know it's Rabbi Akiva, it can still be us. Because Rabbi Akiva is the one who told us that the Torah tells us in this week's Parsha, Ve'ohavta l'recha kamocha, means you should look on somebody else just like you, and just as you would like somebody to advocate about you, you would like somebody to understand all the conflicts that you go through in your life, right? Everybody would like somebody to understand it. The same thing is the way you should try and advocate about your friend. And try to understand the conflicts what your friend goes through in his life. And not only to understand, but to really to support and help, because ultimately we are one. The little separation of that body, and that what I eat, and that what you eat, and that what I drink, this is all temporary and physical, but in our great source and essence of being a neshama, and as more that we're going to talk about it, and as more we're going to learn about it, and as more we're going to meditate about it, we will be able further and greater to develop this mitzvah of ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, which is the mitzvah which, as our sages tell us, is going to bring about the ultimate redemption. And especially in these days of the counting of the Omer, when we are reflecting on the lives of Rabbi Akiva's students, the loss of their lives, obviously it's the most apropos time to strengthen ourselves with this great mitzvah and to realize that life is much greater than what appears to our eyes. Our friends are much greater than what appears in our eyes. And like we started our class tonight with the story of the Rambam, as the Rebbe describes him, that despite all the real challenges the Rambam had, he was an optimist. He was the ultimate optimist. And this optimism only came because the Rambam believed, and he knew what we are studying in Chassidus, he knew about the Neshama we talk about, and he knew that life has a purpose and centered it around God, and that's what gave him the power of optimism. Optimism and love and friendship, it's all stems from the very same core, from the very same essence. So with this, I will wish you all a very good week and a wonderful Shabbat, and enjoy the Parsha, and it's always good to see you. And now if anybody wants to share something, please unmute yourself. We would love to hear your wisdom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. Say something.
I'm speechless.
Speechless? Who is speechless?
Thank you.
That's rare for me too.
What?
Was a very good lesson, Rabbi. Appreciate it.
Who is talking?
This is Rudy.
Oh, Rudy from Chicago.
Champagne.
Champagne. For me, the all Illinois is called Chicago.
Not down here. It isn't. No, as a matter of fact, if we could, we take a big saw and saw Chicago off and push it in the lake, and Illinois would be a wonderful state.
But why? What's going on in Chicago?
Well, it's Illinois. I rest my case. Probably the most corrupt state in the nation. Sad to say.
Sorry.
And
So
here
why
I'm
do you-
stuck.
Why you stuck? A Jew is never stuck.
Well, I got exiled here when my job moved from Massachusetts, which is also a corrupt state, to Illinois, which is a more corrupt state. But then we raised 4 wonderful children here, so it's home.
Very nice. By the way, just for information, which state is not corrupted?
I have no idea. The state of Nirvana, I presume.
Where is Nirvana? Where is it?
Nirvana.
You mean?
Neverland.
Oh, you mean Ivana? This is where Castro is?
Nirvana. It's
Nirvana is the Gan Eden.
Yeah. Yeah,
Where
Gan
is it?
Eden. Gan Eden, that would be not
Gan Eden.
corrupt.
Oh, Gan Eden, I'm not looking to be the Sofest, but someday I have another 70 years at least.
There you go. I appreciate your class. I really do. And we must be appreciating it because by now it is 10:30 here in the evening. So we're 2 hours later.
10:30 is very early in a summer night.
Well, summer is hard to come by right now here. We have psychotic weather here in Illinois right now.
Oh, yeah.
It's been very cold and very windy and very wet and well, it's spring in Illinois.
Very nice. Enjoy Illinois. But just remember, wherever you are, that means that you are meant to be.
This
And
is
make
true.
it, and make it the best life possible there. And with Hashem's help, you're gonna one day find out why you were there.
That's why I think we have a sense on why we are here because we were meant to be here to adopt 4 wonderful children who otherwise would not be with us. So we made a difference. We had to come to Illinois to do it. So we
Got
can't even fantasize our way out of this. You know, we were meant to be here. I really firmly believe that.
Nice. I see a lot of flags behind you. What is all those flags?
Well, I am an adopted citizen of this country. I'm a member of the American Legion. I'm part of the Honor Guard. And so
What's
basically
Honor
that's my collection of American flags.
What's Honor Guard? What is that?
It's a color guard where we, well, basically American Legion is a veterans group. And the Honor Guard, for instance, participates in military.
Oh, the Honor Guard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in military funerals, and I've had to present many a flag to a widow of somebody that we just laid to rest.
I'm sorry, that's not easy. Yeah. Okay. Let's only hear good news. Pleasure to meet you. Nice to see you at class.
All right.
Good to see everybody else. David, how long you still with us?
Well, I'm here through Shabbos.
Oh yeah. We'll see you on Shabbos. Hashem. Elias, everything okay?
Everything okay? Yes, Baruch Hashem. Yes.
Hashem should continue
Yes.
helping.
Mañana, tomorrow it's 7:30.
7:15. Oh, for you it's 6:15.
Mañana.
Mañana Bezrat Hashem, 7:15. Come, join us for davening. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Honey, don't they
Here
say
for you,
that in
boys.
Peru?
What?
Thank you. Thank you,
Ayana,
Rabbi.
Don't they say that in Peru?
Thank you, Adam. Peru? I'm not in Peru. I'm done. Okay, I'm gonna see you guys. Bye.
All right. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night, all.
Bye.